Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We plan to start in 1 minute's time. So in the meantime, we'll put you on mute and join again in 1 minute. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, where we plan to cover two things really. The first will be the return to practice, a new update there from Sue West, who's a member of our team in education. And then we'll hand over and talk a bit more around the test of competence in relation to where we've been, but also where we're moving to. And I'll cover that update as we move forward through today's webinar. We plan to spend about 15 minutes, first of all, talking about the return to practice area of work, and then we'll move on and talk for about 15 minutes in relation to the overseas test of competence. There'll be time at the end to ask your questions, and if you look on your screens, you should see either a red or orange button, and you can press that button and pose your questions online, and we'll take as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. I'm pleased to say that on this webinar this afternoon, we've got Sue West from our education team on the line. We've also got Tom Mitchell, who joins us from Alpha Plus, who are our new design partners. I thought it'd be good, first of all, to hand over to Sue, and Sue will spend a few minutes just talking about our return to practice changes and what's coming. Over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Jack. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm just going to talk to you for a few minutes about how the test of competence can be used to actually enable not students necessarily, but qualified nurses to return to practice and get back on our register. And in doing so, just to update you, the return to practice standards, they were published in May 2019, and there's one brief set of standards that talks to you about how people can return to practice. And then there is a set of standards which is part of our education program standards, part 3, that gives the standards for the return to practice programs. And there are a number of universities who are currently now going through approval processes for their return to practice programs using these standards. And the transition to get these in place will be by September 2021. But in the actual standards themselves, we give you two options that are available for people to return to the register. So the first one is the return to practice standards for programs, and I've already indicated that they are how they will get to return. But the second opportunity is the fact that those that were wishing to return to practice can now undertake a test of competence, and this went live in January of this year. So our registration web pages have been updated, and I'll take you through those in a moment. And there has been some instruction that's gone out in the employer's newsletter. But one of the things that is really useful for employers here is that, like with the overseas nurses, they could look at recruiting people who want to return to practice and then supporting them through a process of education or confidence building in order to then undertake the test of competence as part of that program, if that's what employers wish to do. But it just gives this flexibility now for those qualified nurses who have stepped off the register to come back, and it's for nurses, midwives and nursing associates going forward, but they can step back onto the register by undertaking either a return to practice programme or undertaking the test of competence. You will see here that if you click on the website button for registration, this is what will come up, and you'll see at the bottom there is a box there that says returning to the register. And so employers, educationalists or students wanting to, or not students, the qualified staff wanting to return to the register can click on that, and they will then go to this page. And you'll see on here that there is details about returning to practice and how they can actually follow their career and get back into practice. It talks about applying for readmission to the register. It also talks about the checks that will be put in place for readmission requirements as well. But the important thing is that the next link will either take you to a section about taking a return to practice course, or it will talk about taking the test of competence to return to practice. And the test of competence page will look like this. It's not too dissimilar to what we have for our overseas nurses wanting to get onto the register, and it's got lots of information about the standards, about undertaking the course again if people want to go back to that, about the test of competence itself, and it also follows some of these areas of instruction where taking a test of competence, it tells you about the test. The important thing is it tells you about the essential reading and the standards of proficiency. It's also got some of the test blueprints on there and how to go about booking a test of competence, getting your results, and then completing the readmission application. And then just to finish before Jack takes over, the other important element here is for those that are returning to practice, this creates this assurance for us if they've undertaken a test of competence, and it also enables employers a bit more flexibility about recruiting and encouraging people to return to practice, and therefore find themselves back onto our register if that's what they desire. So if you've got any questions around that process and that flexibility of that process, then do click on the relevant button, as Jack implied, and put your questions through, and I'll be here to answer any of your questions that come through. So Jack, over to you.
Thank you, Sue. That was really comprehensive, and thanks for staying on the line. So over to me then. So thank you for joining our first webinar. Interestingly, we've decided to cover the return to practice because we felt it flowed really nicely in terms of the work we've been doing around the test of competence, but also to share for the very first time some of the changes that we're making around this important area. Over the next month or so, you'll see a number of invites to join us at our various engagement events. They're taking place in Cardiff, Northampton, Ulster and in Edinburgh, and feel free to join any of those events as you see them come through. We're also running a number of webinars over the next month or so, and again we plan to use these webinars to keep you fully updated for some of the changes that we're making. Moving forward, we'll also be sharing what we've called a newsletter update, which we'll be sharing once a month. So again, some of the things that I'm going to be covering today will very much be detailed in our regular newsletter, so please look out for that. So you'll see on the screen in front of you, I just wanted to go through where we've been. It's been a really busy 18 months. I think we've done a huge amount of work to really take into account the feedback we've had around the ways we can improve and strengthen the overseas process, but also the test of competence. In January 2018, the review began, and in that time, we made a number of interim improvements. We reduced the cost of the OSCE and the CBT. We made a number of changes to the preparation materials made available to candidates sitting the OSCE, and alongside this, we introduced top tips, mock exams, and really improved the level of candidate feedback that we provided. We also made one big change in relation to resits, which meant that candidates only had to resit the element of the OSCE that they failed. In December 2018, we made changes to our English language requirements, which we review on an ongoing basis. And I'm pleased to say that we made a change where we now accept a level 6.5 in writing and a level 7 in the 3 other areas. Exciting, in January 2019, we launched the Nursing Associate registration process, and I'm pleased to say that since we went live, we've had around 15,000 NAs on our register, and a good handful of those are from those coming from overseas. In June 2019, we appointed Alpha Plus through an open tender, and I'm pleased to say that since June of this last year, they've been working with us really closely, and I'll cover some of that in more detail as we progress. In July 2019, we appointed our new CBT delivery partner, Pearson VUE. They're the company that deliver the CBT, part 1 of the test of competence. And again, some of you may know them. They were delivering the CBT for us previously, and through an open competition, they were reselected. And I'm pleased to say that they're delivering the CBT for us now, moving forward. A huge amount of work took place, as many of you will know, around updating the current delivery partners' contracts for the OSCE. We made a number of changes throughout the last 18 months. And again, the contracts needed to be amended and updated to reflect some of those changes, including taking away the design element to some of these contracts. In October 2019, we launched our new overseas process, which meant placing much more of our process online, automating areas of our process, and providing lots more useful top tips and checklists for candidates navigating their way through our new process. We then, as we move forward in November 2019, started the recruitment and selection of our new Test of Competence Assurance Advisory Group. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. But this new group will very much help keep our new Test of Competence under regular review and scrutiny to ensure that it's fit for purpose and it does what it should be doing. In January 2020, we made more changes to our English language. And then, as Sue just mentioned, in January this year, we made available the Test of Competence for those wishing to return to practice. Excitingly, in the last few weeks, we've appointed our new quality assurance partner for the Test of Competence, and they should be joining us in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then finally, the summer of this year, we plan to launch our new Test of Competence as we move forward to testing candidates under our future nursing standards. So it's been a really exciting year. We've made a number of changes, and thank you to all of you that have participated in the engagement events, sharing your feedback and learning, which I hope has helped shape some of the changes that we've made. As some of you will know, through some of these changes, demand has increased, and we've seen a real increase in the number of people wishing to use the OSCE and join our register. We keep the demand and capacity at our 3 test sites, Northampton, Oxford Brookes and Ulster, under regular review. And I'm pleased to say that last year, around September time, we closed Ulster, where they underwent a huge level of refurbishment work, and they now see double the amount of candidates in the Ulster area. Later this month, at the end of this month, Northampton, closes for the month of March. Again, they'll be expanding their provision, and from April of this year, they will also be doubling their capacity. So really helping to reduce any waiting times for candidates wishing to sit the Test of Competence. Oxford Brookes has moved from a 3-day-a-week to a 5-day-a-week, and again, have expanded their provision and looking at running weekends where appropriate and into the evenings. So I think we're in a really good position in terms of capacity. Demand is increasing, which is great for us and great for everybody, and we keep it under regular review. And if the need arises, we'll continue to increase our levels of capacity. So the overseas programme, looking forward, just really looking at some of the things that we're really committed to doing over the next few months, really working much more closely with supporting all of you, bringing high quality nurses and midwives into the UK. I've been out and about talking to some of you already about the account management model that we're exploring with Kate Malloy in the international area, around how we can get really close to all of you and the work that you're doing to support the numbers, the higher numbers coming through to the UK to join our register. There's a huge piece of work for us all to ensure that when we bring the new test in the summer, that it lands appropriately, that people feel supported and people know what's coming. And again, in the next few minutes, I'll be talking about some of the things that we're going to do to really support you in terms of the preparation for the new test coming in the summer of this year. And there's also one piece of work that we'll be doing, which will be looking at really what we do post 2022. As you know, the current contracts for the current test of competence by way of delivery and design end in 2022. And it's a really good opportunity over the next year to see whether or not the test of competence is something we're planning to do longer term, or whether there's other ideas that we want to explore. So this next year, we'll be looking at that too. Moving forward at the new test of competence and some of the background, as you know, one of the key drivers for updating the test was the new standards coming for both nurses and midwives. The current 3 delivery partners have been designing the test for us over the last couple of years, but we saw it as a really good opportunity to have a new partner really focusing their efforts and levels of expertise on the new design work. We've published and plan to continue to publish the test of competence blueprints for both nurses and midwives. And the test of competence will test a combination of proficiencies, skills and procedures included from the blueprint that we'll share with you. Alpha Plus have conducted, since they've been appointed, a comprehensive review of our current test of competence. And they've looked very closely at the levels of appeals and complaints and learning and general feedback in their work in the last 6 months or so. So really looking at the design partner, Alpha Plus, they were appointed, as I said to you, in June 2019 to really be our supplier for the design work for the new test of competence. They're experts in designing assessments and examinations for a range of clients, and again, you'll see more about them online. The last 9 months has been really busy. They've been setting up their team, meeting current partners, which has included our delivery and CBT partners, meeting stakeholders out on the road as we went to Cardiff and other venues, really listening about the feedback that you all had about the current test and some of your ideas for the future. They've spent a good 3 or 4 months reviewing the current test. I think it's fair to say there's been lots in our current test that's been strong and we've decided to keep, but it's been through an area of repurposing against our new standards. But there's also been an opportunity to really take a long look at what we've got currently and to expand some of the skills and content that we've got, and I'll cover some of that as we move forward. They've then spent the last 2 or 3 months really finalising their test specification, and that's really looking at what year 1 looks like and what year 2 looks like, and really focusing on the actual development of the content. And the last few months has been spent on actually working with authors from Nottingham University and others, devising and developing the content, which has been really exciting. At the moment, the design and development work is on track. They've been working, Alpha Plus has been working, as I said, with all of our key stakeholders, delivery partners for the new test of competence, and trialling will start in the next couple of weeks, both at Nottingham University and at Swindon. And that's a real opportunity to start really trialling the content that's been designed for us by Alpha Plus. The key design documents that we will refer to and will publish for you will be the NMC standards for both nursing and midwifery. We'll publish all of the test blueprints. Some of them have been published already, and we're due to finalise that piece of work in the next week or so. And we'll also make available the Alpha Plus test specification. And again, that will detail some of the things that I covered today, but will be a useful document for your reference. Just moving forward, looking at the test design and structure in a little bit more detail. The new CBT will be split into two parts, as you can see on the screen. There'll be part A, which is a numeracy paper of 15 marks that will last 30 minutes, and a theory-based part, part B, which will be 100 questions in total lasting 2 hours and 30 minutes. For the OSCE, we're moving from a 6-station setup to 10 stations. We'll maintain and keep the APIE section of the OSCE, assessment, planning, implementation, evaluation. But rather than test 2 skills, we'll be testing 4 skills in total. Looking at the changes of our standards, we'll be adding 2 further stations, which will be 2 further skills, and we'll be testing professional behaviours and also critical appraising. And they will be 2 separate stations, which makes up the 10-station OSCE. Looking at the CBT Part A numeracy, separate Part A and B, meaning each part is passed or failed independently. As I said, it will be a 30-minute exam, 15 marks in total, and be constructed by way of multiple choice or constructive responses, and we can give you a taster of those as we move through the slide deck. The numeracy included is relatively straightforward, pre-GCSE, set at a very basic level, and again, this has been tested and trialled with our partners across the delivery and Nottingham University teams. We're going to permit a calculator. At least 2 practice tests will be provided for each field of nursing and midwifery. And one thing that we are spending a huge amount of time on is around preparation and making sure people have plenty of opportunity to prepare and practice. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail with the next few slides, but just if you look at the example numeracy question on the screen there, these will be the typical questions that we'll use in part A of the CBT. We're going to move away from lots of written text. We'll do what we can to make it look much more interesting. And again, you can see on the screen there some of the ways that we may do that in terms of this question, which is a syringe. What volume has been drawn up into this syringe? Looking at example 2, again, is another example of the numeracy question bank that we'll be looking to use. And again, over the next few months, we'll be populating many practice questions for candidates and those supporting. Looking at question 3 is another example of a numeracy question. Again, this is an example. There's not a choice of 4 options in this one. It's for the candidate to select from their own knowledge the correct answer, and by doing a very simple numeracy calculation. Looking then and moving on to part B, which is theory, it's going to be very similar to the existing CBT with all of the numeracy questions removed. Where appropriate, the questions have been taken from the existing bank, and as I said earlier, there's been many of the questions that were considered strong but just needed repurposing against our future nurse and midwifery standards, and that was a big piece of work that Alpha Plus did for us. Also, of course, there's an opportunity to bring in new items, and the Alpha Plus team and our partners have been working really hard to increase the bank of questions that we use in the CBT theory exam. It's designed to cover the full range of standards and at all levels of the Bloom's taxonomy, and all nursing tests are, I think we've shared previously, are 90% generic and 10% field specific, and that remains the same. There's no change in relation to that. Looking at the screen now is another example. Again, over the next few months, we're going to be sharing many more examples. But again, this is an example of a theory question. The question you'll see is on the screen in front of you, followed by 4 possible correct answers. And then what we've done here is break down the answer, which is D in this example, followed by the primary platform the question's taken from, what field it is, and this one it's generic. And from the Bloom's level, it's around evaluate and create. And again, just by way of example, we'll share more of these as we move forward. The example 2 question does the same thing, gives you an example of the type of theory that we'll be testing, followed by 4 possible answers, with 1 correct answer being acceptable. All of the engagement events have talked extensively about the need for preparation materials. And again, throughout this presentation and towards the end, I'll give you a little bit more information about what we plan to do to release more comprehensive preparation material. This next slide, looking at the OSCE structure, really picks up on what I've talked about before. And I've had some questions come in already about some of the skills. One thing we absolutely will do is share with everybody the skills that we plan to use in the OSCE. We won't, of course, be telling people what skills will be used on any certain day or any certain centre, but it's absolutely right that candidates know what they're going to be tested on. And it's absolutely right that those supporting can absolutely prepare those sitting this important exam. Here it's just showing you that we're, as you can see along the top, APIE. We're keeping APIE. We think that's the right thing to do. It works well. We've had some great feedback. And then you'll see skills 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are the two skills. Skill 1 and 2 are what we do already, and then skills 3 and 4 will be the new skills that we'll be testing in terms of the extension of the original 2. So 4 skills in total. Skill 5 and 6, which makes that overall 9 and 10 of the station, will be looking at professional behaviours and appraising evidence. And again, we'll look at an example of what that may look like in the future. Looking at RM1 down the side, you'll see pneumonia, subdural, anxiety, UTI, hernia, asthma, and I'm sure you'll recognise all of those in terms of the skills that we currently use. Over the next month or so, we'll be sharing with you the new skills around dementia, confusion, leg ulcer, and some of the new skills that we'll be asking candidates to sit. There's a little key in the bottom left-hand corner on the screen that looks at what area has just been repurposed, where there's been least amount of changes, where there's been real significant changes just because of the changes in terms of updating the exam and making sure that it's fit for purpose and in line with our new standards, which of course have changed. And the very dark green is very much the new area, which you'll see, for example, under skill 5 and 6, which is new content and new skills that we'll be testing under the new standards. Just moving on to the slide around repurposing APIEs. Again, this slide just helps with some of the bigger changes that we've made around APIE. Although we're keeping APIE in the new exam, when you look at the A for assessment, we are making changes from just taking the ordinary observations, for example, temperature, BP, pulse, respirations, to a full A to E assessment. That will include airway, breathing, circulation, disability, exposure, to really reflect current clinical assessment. P for planning stays the same very much, planning 2 aspects of care as a written station, and I stays the same, implementation, which is the drug administration for this part of the exam. For the evaluation, changes have been made around the written referral to another healthcare professional, which we do today, but to a non-assessed written SBAR assessment and an assessed verbal handover to another healthcare professional, the examiner, again, making changes against our new standards and updating our test in the most appropriate way. All of the exam that we share, the new exam in the summer of this year, has been and will be mapped against our new nursing standards. Again, just giving you a flavour, again, many of these you'll know already. These are the OSCE repurposed skills. These are the things that we feel work really well, that are absolutely reflective of everyday current practice, but have required some work to match them appropriately against our new standards. And you'll see a list of those, including some of the new ones, just to give you a flavour around IV infusion, VIP assessment, blood glucose monitoring. And again, as I said to you, throughout this presentation, we'll share the new skills with you as we move forward. One thing that will be really important around the two new stations that I talked about around professional behaviours and appraising is that we provide as many examples as we can about how this will look for candidates sitting the OSCE. And again, on the screen, I'm just going to leave you for a couple of minutes just to read what's there, which is an example of the new station for evidence-based practice. Sorry about that, that was just our fire alarm. So you'll see in the extract an example of what the candidate will need to read. We'll provide some abstracts which the candidate will be required to look through, and then they'll be asked to answer a few questions. And again, this can be done in bullet point style. It's not requiring candidates to write pages and pages. Again, that's an example on the screen in front of you. There is around the, I've just given you an example of the evidence-based practice, but there's also, yeah, I think I've covered that one, haven't I? So yeah, just giving you a feel for what that can look like moving forward. So again, we'll be giving you lots more as we move forward. I've been in this post now for coming up to 4 years, and one thing I take really seriously and one thing I've heard really loud and clear is how much all of you do to prepare for the test of competence. And I see this as a really important thing for us to get right as we move towards the summer, which is to really provide a comprehensive and thorough picture of what is expected of both candidates, but also those that are spending huge amounts of time and money supporting candidates from overseas. Everything we do moving forward in terms of preparation will be streamlined. We'll keep them as simple and as brief as possible. And where we can, we'll provide real examples of the tasks and questions candidates will have to answer in the live tests. And I've given you some examples throughout this slide presentation. We'll make them easy to locate, and all candidates will access them at the same, we'll have access to all of them at the same time, and we'll make them, as I said, easily accessible. One thing we've heard as part of the engagement events is people would like these about 8 to 12 weeks before. And again, we're factoring that time scale in when looking at when the new test goes live. And it's looking like the new test will be the summer of this year and probably July, August time. But again, we'll be telling you more about that in the coming weeks. The actual support materials on the screen you'll see, which I've talked about already, we'll have the standards absolutely published for you to look at. We'll make sure the NMC blueprints are available, and we'll put those in a really user-friendly format for you. And as I said previously, we'll make the test specification available in case you have any specific questions, and in the spirit of being absolutely open and transparent. There'll be lots of other things we do in terms of materials. Candidate journey, one for candidates and one for trusts. So really making it easy for the candidates going through the process, but also for those supporting. We'll have an overview of documents around the nature of care in the UK. We've had lots of feedback about people just preparing people for the OSCE, but us not having a lot around the actual nature of care and the way we do things in the UK. and we'll absolutely be open, and we'll be sharing our chief examiner report and their observations as we move forward with the new test. Just looking before I wrap up, the CBT support materials, we're going to have guidance for the day itself and before the day. We're going to have practice tests, 50 numeracy questions, and also 50 theory questions. And that will be made available for each nursing pathway. And what we'll do is we'll make those practice tests available online, so that it will give the candidate a good feel and a true representation of the test that they're likely to encounter, although shorter than the 100 questions in the real exam. We'll also, as we move forward and as the need, the demand comes through, we'll also be regularly over the next 6 to 12 months increasing the bank of numeracy questions, practice numeracy questions, so you've got those. And we have to bear in mind, June, July, I talked a bit around go live around being the summer of this year, is that that's just the one step we're making to improve the test of competence. And over the coming years, we'll be doing more and more. So this is really just the start in terms of the work that we're doing. And again, we'll be engaging and talking to you a lot about that. Finally, a couple of more minutes from me before we break for a minute, where we can take your questions. The OSCE support materials, very much picking up on what I've said throughout this presentation. There'll be a number of overview OSCEs, so some mock exams that we'll make available. Will include the good work that's been done already on top tips. We'll keep those up to date and keep those flowing. We'll give good guidance, which we do already, but again, we'll do more around guidance before the day and guidance on the day. And we'll give loads of examples around sample materials and some of the stuff around our marking guidance, including the red flag use around, and the red flag use is very much looking at somebody who has ticked all of the boxes throughout the OSCE, but unfortunately, through a part of their exam, have caused harm to a patient, which would have resulted in serious harm or death. And again, there'll be a red flag system that will be used. And again, we'll talk more about that, and we'll build on the top tips. So lots of new stuff coming. It's a really exciting time. We're engaging and talking to all of you over the next 2 or 3 months. And what I would say is get in touch, with any of your questions. Again, we'll share a email address that you can contact. But again, many of you have got my direct details. I'm very happy to answer your questions.